Good morning and welcome everyone. First, I hope everyone is healthy and safe and doing what they need to do to stay that way. My name is Andrea Ray and I have the pleasure to serve as the President CEO at the Chamber. And on behalf of our board and staff, welcome to our SMART Southside Mitigation and Recovery Task Force webinar on remote work management and teleworking in the COVID era. As so many businesses and workers are having to make the shift to work from home, many challenges and questions have risen to the surface. We're glad that you have joined us today to learn more about implementing best practices. This copyrighted webinar is presented by the Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce and may not be reproduced or retransmitted in any form without the express written consent of the Chamber. Thank you to our sponsor, South King Media. Scott and Teresa Schaefer have been tireless advocates for our community. As a small business themselves, they are dedicated to helping other small businesses grow, as well as keeping our community connected and informed. Scott is broadcasting this webinar live on Facebook so that even more people are able to watch with us and ask questions. And we are also recording so that those of you who aren't able to join live can still access this very valuable information later at their convenience. The Chamber will continue to produce webinars and virtual events on subjects impacting our community. On October 23rd, we hope you'll join from us as we hear from Fuse Networks on cybersecurity for your home. You can register for all of our webinars and virtual events on our website, seattlesouthsidechamber.com. We know providing opportunities to share information and connect will make our community stronger and ready for recovery. We hope you can join us for more of these opportunities. And if you or your company is able to donate or sponsor our work so that we can continue to serve our community in and through every challenge, it would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps. Even a donation of $1 brings us that much closer to recovery, helps to keep our nonprofit and our community strong. Thank you so much. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Elham Shirazi. Elham works for kingcounty.gov and WorkSmart. It's a program that offers free consulting to employers on implementing and learning more about teleworking. Elham has 30 years of experience in developing telework and flexible scheduling programs. She has developed resource materials, conducted training workshops, worked with hundreds of employers, deployed thousands of teleworkers, and evaluated the impacts of telework and flexible scheduling on employers, employees, and trip reduction. She has worked with both public and private sector agencies, with small, medium, and large employers nationwide. She has also helped develop regional telework resources and flexible scheduling and assistance programs throughout California, Florida, Georgia, Washington, D.C., Colorado, Maryland, New York, Connecticut, Texas, and Arizona. She has even advised the White House, congressional leaders, and many public entities on teleworking and flexible schedules. Elham is the chair of the Association for Commuter Transportation's Telework and Alternative Work Hours Council and serves as secretary for the national board. In 2005, Elham was awarded the Association for Commuter Transportation's Kathy Cole Telework Memorial Award for her achievements in the work of teleworking. We can think of no better expert to help walk us through best practices today than you, Elham. Thank you so much for being here today. And the presentation is yours.
Thank you so much, Andrea. When I sent you my bio, I didn't know that you were going to read the whole thing, but thank you anyhow. And let's talk a little bit about what's happening with remote management and how you can be better leaders as telework and work from home has become a component of how you're getting work done at your organizations. So let's go ahead and get to the next slide, please. Typically, it's really critical that within your organization, whether it's small, medium, or large, that you have commitment that's tied to teleworking that goes beyond what we're doing today, which is beyond business continuity. And although there's great value in, I mean, we are in the 6 months of, work at home because of COVID, that we recognize that there are other issues that can help improve our bottom line as a result of having people work at home. Typically, if you select the right people, productivity should go up in the range of 10 to 20%. And this is well documented by a lot of studies, as well as by Stanford and Harvard Business Review. Most employers do find that it really improves recruitment and retention, especially, with jobs that are based in Puget Sound, where employees do job hop a lot. It's a good consideration because employees look for flexibility today, and it doesn't matter how old they are, how young they are. Flexibility is the future of work. We also have found that many times employees' morale is better, obviously because they're not sitting through the commute. And, pre-COVID, of course, telework was not about being under the same roof with your family. It was really about having a day away from the office where you could concentrate, you could focus, be available, and get your work done. For some employers, it really does give them a chance to reduce overhead. Maybe some of you are thinking about that right now. Maybe you're wondering, wow, if 50% of our staff, 30% of our staff could telework, at some point, is it possible to rent less space as well as less parking? And some organizations have started looking into hoteling, which means that the office becomes available on a reservation basis. And, if there are questions about that, I'll be happy to address it in the Q&A. Obviously, a way to improve sustainability, a way to improve coverage, and to reduce absenteeism and tardiness. Let's go to the next slide, please. A manager's role in this environment is to maximize the productivity of staff. But given the technology and remote access, and I know that many of you may have started with not robust programs, but from a technology perspective are probably a lot more stronger now. Whatever trust there was in the workplace, trust is a very important component of teleworking. Without trust, it's hard to have people work remotely. And so you had to deal with the trust that was already there, which hopefully has deepened, and the relationships that were there, and obviously upper management approval. Let's go to the next slide. As I mentioned before, teleworking during COVID took a different face. And I'm very happy that the media called this work from home and not telework, because during COVID, what happened, as I mentioned before, is that because of the nature of the virus, everything shut down. And we pretty much saw that people went home under, one roof with, themselves working, with their partners, spouses working, also providing homeschooling, providing childcare, cooking, baking, and being stressed by the pandemic, and now being stressed by other factors in our society. Let's go to the next slide. So, I'm so sorry. What we saw happen also was that of the 100% of people who are in the workforce, about 40% first went home to telework. And what's interesting is that right now, based on some of the latest data that is coming in, we're actually seeing that more than half, 52%, of working employees are teleworking. Don't forget, there's the other half, which maybe cannot, or maybe they're essential workers and we don't want to forget them. And, obviously we want to take care of them as well. But of that initial 40%, a good half of them had never teleworked before. Let's go to the next slide. So we asked people also, this was based on a SHRM survey, all the citations are at the bottom of the slides, who they were co-working with. Obviously, more than half had their pets, more than half had their significant other. About a good 40% had children. And then there are people at the other end of the spectrum, which were lonely because it was just themselves. So we don't want to forget them either. So as you can imagine, in most households, we are dealing with a lot of activities that are probably going on at the same time. Let's go to the next slide. Initially, when asked how often people were interrupted by others in the household, the majority, 66% said between 0 and 5. And I would bet you that that number has gone up at this point. And also when asked if people do show their face on video conference calls, we saw that the majority do. In fact, in the adoption of collaborative technologies, we probably pretty much went from forecasts that said in 3 years we're going to be here, with video conferencing and all that, to doing in a very, very quick amount of time. Let's go to the next slide. We also asked people, how are you set up to work at home? And again, this was SHRM asking them, but it's an important consideration. About half said they had a home office. But then when you look at it, 34% said dining room table. The couch, the bed are not great places to telework, nor is a dining room table if you're sharing it with other members of your household. And we're going to talk about some of these issues because certainly having a desk and a chair for working at home is part and parcel of being productive, unless you live alone. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So CNBC did some surveys of swing states, and they were asking what were people doing, with the time that they're saving on their commute. I've done a lot of focus groups, and believe me, hardly anyone misses the commute, and that has been one of the best advantages of teleworking during this time we're working from home. But as you can see, a lot of people said they were spending time with their family. The second most popular response was relaxing, followed by sleeping, followed by hobbies, and then working more. Pre-COVID, what we saw typically was that people either said they were working more or sleeping more. So this is a change. And obviously, again, because of everyone being together, there is more time spent with family. Some people are enjoying it, but some people are having a little bit of a hard time, going from one to the other and making sure that there are barriers in place. Let's move on to the next one, please. A lot of people do have difficulty focusing. And I'm not surprised that the top distraction is watching the news and the media. And it's very important that when you're working and when your employees are working, that you unplug, the TV, the radio, the news, everything else that is going on, because it can really break people's concentration. Okay, let's go to the next one. Obviously, there are ways that you also have to, focus on yourselves as business owners, and, your health, your mental health is also very important. This is kind of a commonsensical list, but we're going to do a little bit more of this later. But know yourself, be very much task-oriented. Making lists are very important during this period. In fact, we do recommend that employees develop, a to-do list for the whole week with their managers at the beginning of the week, and then check in towards the end, but we will talk about that. Try to structure your day if possible, and try to find ways to develop barriers between what your home responsibilities, your life is about, and your work. It could be that you're able to keep working for 2 hours and need to take a break to take care of something with your child if they're home, and then hopefully you can train them and go back to work. You may want to, we talked about limiting media consumption. You may want to also have a timer for your communications, and make sure that you have a calendar that you're keeping to. We'll talk about taking breaks, but do stay active and don't fall into the trap of Obviously, snacking, I think a lot of people have complained about that so far. Let's go to the next slide. So when asked initially, uh, of the people who had started teleworking, how many of them wanted to return back to the office? Of the 100%, about half said that they wanted to head back to the office. Now, this was at the beginning of the pandemic. What has changed since then, and there have been a lot of surveys that have come in, is that we're seeing a lot of organizations talking about maybe for every employee, maybe 2-3 days on site, maybe 2-3 days at home. For some, it may be as little as 1 day at home, but the flexibility seems to be prevailing. And it's very rare that I hear of an employer that says, I want everybody to come back. There are some, of course, there are some, because they also have big offices. They don't know what to do with them. But everybody is starting to look at a hybrid type of a situation when the job is right, when the employee is right, when the technology works, and when the manager is on board and they trust the employee. So let's keep going. One thing to be cognizant of is that, we have been teleworking as a nation since the late 70s, and there are legalities around teleworking, and there are some benefits about having the rules of the engagement in place. And what I mean by that is even having a piece of, a one piece of paper, one side, talking about some guidelines, maybe having serious policies, or having something called an agreement where both parties side really does help. What are the reasons for this? Why should we formalize this arrangement? First of all, you want to be safe. So you want to make sure the legality side is covered, and I will talk about those. When you have rules on paper, it accommodates larger numbers of people to telework. We're getting away from the models of, oh, there's one here teleworking, one there teleworking, and it gives the organization the ability to be transparent from both, what's involved in teleworking, what are the eligibility rules, what are the ways to identify candidates. So everything becomes a lot more transparent. And, employees and managers are on the same page. And also what, guidelines do is that they make sure that the solution works and continue in some fashion once, we do revert to some kind of normalcy. And we don't know what that will be. So let's go on to the next slide where I can talk about these legalities. Obviously, first and foremost are your wage and labor hour laws. So I'm sure that those of you who have non-exempt and exempt employees know that for the non-exempts, you cannot go over 40 hours of work a week without going into overtime. So you want to make sure that for those groups of individuals, because they can be teleworkers too, there's nothing that says a non-exempt cannot be a teleworker. It all goes back to what they're doing. It's good to have some, measures in place, whether it's as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, which says when they started, when they took a break, and when they stopped. That would be sufficient, but there are other, types of programs online that are free for employees that can show that they logged on and then they logged off at a certain time. And in fact, some employers are still keeping whatever measure they had for the non-exempt before in place now. The next level of legality comes in with workers' comp. And let me share with you that although this may sound a little worrisome, I want to let you know that it has not been a litigious area. When an employee works at home, if they are injured, it could be considered workers' comp. However, what employers do is they do limit it to the designated workspace, which there has to be one. Workers' comp does not apply to the kitchen. If your employee goes in the kitchen, they cut their hand, that's not workers' comp. And they also agree upon the working hours and that it has to be work related. The best news about this is that although we've been teleworking and the federal government's been teleworking for many years, this has not become an area that is contentious. I do recommend that if you're concerned, you call your workers' comp carrier and ask them, our employees are teleworking, do our rates change? I'm pretty sure the answer you will get is no, unless you start getting a lot of cases. So it's good to know about this, and to also make sure that in training employees, we give them ergonomics training, and tell them you really should have a separate area, you should have a good chair, etc. But the other good side about this is that OSHA, or the Occupational Safety and Health Act, does not require employers to do home office inspections. Well, I'm sure we all know during COVID, this would be impossible, but even prior to COVID, only about 5% of employers maybe would have gone out to check employees' work sites. And that was typically in the case of full-time teleworkers, where the employer was already going out to install equipment. So it was rare. I'm not going to say it didn't happen, but OSHA does not require you to do this. In fact, in building your policy or your guidelines for teleworking, you can put a caveat in there which says the employer reserves the right to inspect the workspace if needed. By the way, I'm not an attorney. I've been around this stuff for a long time, but I am hoping that, you will, if need be, you will talk to your attorneys to make sure they weigh in. As far as your ADA and FMLA go, telework does not have to be an accommodation. Sometimes people are worried that it's, you definitely have to do that. No. Typically, in a telework policy, we don't deal with ADA or FMLA. It's dealt with on the ADA side of the house and the FMLA. So if it is an accommodation that the employer believes could be mutually suitable, it can be implemented. Something else to think about is you want to make sure that we're not, developing language that is discriminatory in how we communicate about teleworking. I really do shudder when I see people call teleworking a benefit, a perk, a privilege, because with those kinds of terms, we're creating haves and have-nots. I would say, instead of sounding like, oh, some people just get it, I think it's best to call it a workplace strategy. Just like I said, when the job is right, when the employee is right, when the manager approves, technology works, etc. Have any of these been a showstopper? No. There are millions of Americans who are teleworking. And I always say, if the federal government can do it, then they've surpassed all of these, issues. And there is a very, very strong program at the federal level. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but at least it does show that none of these legalities are an issue. Let's move to the next slide, please. So the question probably is, what is typically included in these program guidelines, policies? This probably, the most important components are having goals. Why are we doing this? If you're just doing it for business continuity, then it should be there to manage expectations after COVID, because people may assume that it may continue. However, I do urge that you go back to some of the return on investment that I spoke about first when we started this presentation, and see if you can tie it to other reasons like recruitment, retention, like morale. Also, the guidelines should have a discussion of how selection is done, and what criteria are used. And in fact, some organizations do have some, initial criteria, such as you have to be meeting performance or hitting above in order to be considered, or you have to have been with the organization at least 6 months, a year to be considered. So you can build some of the selection criteria outside of whether the job is right or the employee is right. The guidelines should also indicate what kind of an arrangement. Is it the arrangement that it may vary by employee? Some employees can do it, a day a week, some may, it will depend on the manager. Or, is it that the organization is setting a limit on the amount of teleworking, 2 days a week only, that is available? Obviously, frequency scheduling issues should be mentioned. Communication needs should be clear. Employees have to be available. They have to, be returning emails, returning calls. They have to, attend webinars and all of that. The workers' comp we already talked about, but typically this is in writing on the guideline. Some employers have decided not to put it there, although they know it applies, but they're worried about it. Again, I just wanted to share that. And also we do want to have, a discussion of what are the available resources, what can be taken home, what is the technology like, is the employer going to provide it, is the employee going to provide it, who insures the equipment? Obviously, if the employer provides it, they insure it. If the employee provides it, they insure it. Having a workspace and making sure that non-telecommuters are not impacted. By the way, telecommuting, teleworking, they're very interchangeable. Let's go to the next slide. This is something which is called a Telework Form or an agreement. It's good to have something in place for each employee that's signed by both the manager and the employee, which says where the employee is going to be working, the address, very important, how many days and from what date to what date, what are the hours, to the degree you can specify those. Some employers are still going with 8:30 to 5 and don't want people to, telework late at night. Some are different. And then, some agreement on what they're working on, the equipment, how often they check messages, etc. Let's go to the next slide. So for teleworking to be effective or working from home, managers do need to transition from managing presence to managing productivity. And what we mean by that is that managers should be goal-oriented, they should provide direction, they should identify tasks, they should identify deliverables, they should identify milestones and help provide training and oversight so employees can do this and pretty much become more independent and can put that list together. In fact, ideally, an employee should be able to develop a list for the week. And, the manager should be able to provide ongoing feedback. And let's go to the next slide. I have a few more that kind of reiterate this. When asked how productivity was measured of managers, and this slide is not very new, but I think it's actually good that it was done in 2014 because it even shows that as early as 2014, the most popular types of responses were responsiveness of employee, for example, how quickly they're responding to emails, returning phone calls, managers establishing goals and parameters with the employee. It could be on the honor system, they said, but very low on the list is at the almost bottom, at 9%, organization monitors employees via software that tracks and records commuter behavior. Even in this environment, I had managers tell me, oh, I do check in on my teleworkers, I call them or I, just, check in every few hours. I'm like, why? That's really not a positive way to work for you or for them. And in fact, isn't it better if you just, get reports on what's being done? Let's go to the next slide. So what we're encouraging that managers do with teleworkers is on a weekly basis, as I mentioned, come up with a list of what is expected to get done during that week. Initially, your employee may not be able to do it. Hopefully by now they're able to do it because they've been doing it for so long. And you want to make sure they know their objectives, they know their deliverables or timeframes, and they can send an email to you beginning of the week saying, here's what I'm going to work on this week. By the end of the week, they should check off items, and I'll show you a form that can be used by some, just saying what the status was. And this process should be, I think, repeated every week. I do recommend highly that you do have a video meeting with your teleworker once a week, just to gauge how are they doing. Are they feeling, tired? Do they look like they're lonely? And do, reach out on a personal basis to them to see how their week has been, because COVID is a difficult time for a lot of people and a lot of families. Let's go to the next one. Thank you. This is a task schedule. It's really simple, as you can see. It can be filled out on a weekly basis where the employee identifies the task, the deliverable. They also identify what they're, at the beginning of the week, they're only filling out line 1 and 2. I'm going to work on the following 4 tasks. Here's what I'm working on, the deliverable. Then at the end of the week, all they have to do is just write down what their accomplishment was. And if they didn't accomplish anything on that task, they should explain what happened. Again, you don't have to use this form, or you can use a different form, but it does help keep both parties, the manager and the employee, on the same page in terms of what the expectations are. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. The other thing to consider is that we do have a style of management that is very much employee-based. With some employees, we have to direct them. They may be new. They may need very concrete descriptions of what they're supposed to be doing. And, you have to pretty much spell it out. Some are at a point where they can get by with a little bit of coaching. And then when employees get to the level where you're advising them or delegating to them, it's actually a lot easier because the employee is very independent and they have a good understanding for what is the task, and they can develop that list. Hopefully what's happening is that the trust is getting deeper because the work is getting done, that we're managing a little bit more electronically, obviously, than before. And that, there are a lot of questions that come up and should be responded to, and people should feel at ease about asking questions, as well as that independence going deeper. So let's move on to the next one. We also feel that, again, I know you're 6 months into doing this, but if, you haven't been doing any of what we're talking about, or you've forgotten to keep doing it, it's a good time to reassess and make fixes. So, look at communications. How are they going on in the office and, at home with employees? And if it's okay for your employees to interrupt you, send you a text, call you, or to interrupt each other, which it should be, because in the office, we do walk up to each other, right? I think we need to be cognizant of it. So not everything becomes about waiting for an email or about a video conversation. In fact, the phone is often forgotten when people during COVID, and I think the phone is an excellent instrument that actually, when you don't know people, it's highly recommended that you contact them first by phone and then migrate to video. The other thing is that please be clear with your employees if they can flex, to start earlier, end earlier, if they can flex to start later, end later, maybe because of childcare duties, maybe because you want better coverage, and that you have an understanding of what their core hours are. It may be that the whole office or the whole business is not available at the same time, but it could be that they're different core hours for different individuals based on what they're doing. the employees' schedules, or whatever platform that you use for indicating people's schedules, should be updated. Obviously, you can use Outlook, but it should include both work and life issues, meaning that if there is personal non-available time during the day where the employee is not going to, for an hour, they have to check out, they have some kind of child duty, that it's very obvious that that is personal non-available time. And that's the best way that we can keep communications going and not worry about, oh, why hasn't so-and-so called me back? Let's go to the next slide. We know that the office was a great place to brainstorm, but even with some of the offices that are, letting people back in, they're coming back socially distanced, and the hustle and bustle of the office is not there. So people may be going in, but it's not the old, office where everybody was talking and, you could do exchanges and brainstorm, in fact, readily. So one recommendation is that if you are brainstorming with an employee, please take a pause and think through who else should be involved in this conversation. And call them, text them, ask them if they're available, and then have a group meeting so that you can, have the serendipity of the office. Obviously, FaceTime does help, but also do be wary that a lot of Zoom and team meetings do cause fatigue because of the way we process the information over the video. Sometimes your good old telephone is still a good avenue. Let's go to the next one. In terms of teamwork, there should be clear direction from management. I'm sorry, I should have replaced that picture because we're not going to see that for a while of people sitting that close to each other. But anyhow, that's not how communication is going to happen now, or teamwork. And we do need to have clear direction as to when, people have to be available, how they should be available. Make sure that every meeting has a lead with an agenda and clear topics, because you can't benefit from the organic type of gestures that you have in an in-person meeting. Sometimes having a 15-minute meeting or 45-minute are much better than having an hour or half hour, and you can get your work done. A lot of organizations have found that when they have a 15-minute huddle, whereby employees in the morning just stand up, during a video call and go, this is what I'm going to do today. This is how I am. Then everybody kind of gives a report how they are, what are they doing. The meeting ends in 15 minutes, that they're energized to go and do work. Kind of gives them a good way to start the day. Some organizations do this a few times a week. Some do it once a week. Being alone is depressing, and we do want to make sure that we're bringing the teams together, in whatever way possible. Make sure that everybody has time to learn the technology and has the technology readily available. Let's go to the next slide. We talked about huddles. I do want you to think about, again, team meetings, and make sure that trust is being developed so employees can tell you about problems, and also you as managers, nip it in the bud if there's a problem that comes up. Being verbal about issues is critical, because we don't have the office interaction to tell us that, okay, we need to talk about this problem. So as I said, be a problem solver, notice it, get it solved. Let's go to the next slide. Virtual breaks, virtual coffee, these are great ways for people to get together without talking about work. Sometimes it may end up that they brainstorm about work, but people do need engagements, employee engagements, to feel that they're still connected with their coworkers. Make sure your employees have work-life balance. If you're getting emails late at night from an employee, actually tell them not to do it. Because they may be burning out, they may be getting work from home fatigue, and it's better if there are, specific times where employees do finally check out of work, because that's what they were doing before. Let's go to the next slide. A few helpful tips for yourselves, because you may be teleworking, and of course you have staff that's teleworking. And if you've forgotten these, please go back to them. Have a morning ritual which says, here's where I start the day. Maybe it's that you get up, you take a shower, you get dressed, not dressed up, obviously. Don't stay in your pajamas, please, because that does kind of make it easier to go to bed. You want to schedule those virtual breaks with your coworkers. Get up and move around. Sitting in the same position for many hours is not healthy. So you need to stretch. You need to take that 15-minute break in the morning, take that 15-minute break in the afternoon, but even during the day, just, if you have a desk that you can use, which is, that you can stand and sit, that's really good to keep yourself moving, not get your back into a position where it will hurt. Please try to eat lunch away from your desk so that you can give the appropriate time to yourselves to refresh, unless you're having lunch with a coworker who may be sitting, and you're just going over video. I know that you live in a beautiful area, state of Washington. I'm in California. State of Washington is just lovely. When the weather allows, do go for walks. I know a lot of you go out and enjoy nature. Please continue doing those things. The last thing you want to do is just work and take care of people. Meditation, some organizations have mindfulness, 15 minutes. In fact, people have told me that the commute was a buffer between home and work and home before. So if you're missing that buffer, not the commute, it's not bad to start your morning with 5 minutes of meditation. Before you end work, also have, 5 minutes for yourself to be calm before you go to your other responsibilities. And have an end of the day ritual. I highly encourage that, if you can't travel, we know we're all in that boat. Either go somewhere locally or take some time off that you can unplug. 6 months without any personal time off is not good. So I know you're all saving it to go on a good vacation, but it might be a while. Your mental health is very important. Let's go to the next 2-3 slides. Do ask that employees get organized. I've talked about this. Please ask that they have a dedicated workspace for yourselves. Do the same. In fact, that does create a space around you that the family needs to respect, in that you are working, you're not available. We talked about routines and being organized. Let's go to the next slide. I think it's critical that you do also talk about, I'm home, I'm mommy, I'm daddy, but I'm still working. So, the more we train people around us, the more they're going to respect the fact that there are going to be blocks of time that are theirs, and then blocks of time that are yours to get your work done. Have rules for your office materials. Make sure family members are not coming and taking, stuff that you need to get your work done. Although I would say that, we all do have to have empathy during this period, because it is hard on families, and it's hard on families who are multitasking, and it's very also hard on people who are single parents or live alone. So everybody, it's hard on everybody in this spectrum. Let's go to the next slide. These are just some, again, suggestions on maintaining health and wellness. You can share it with your employees. Having a regular schedule, staying connected with others, a strong immune system. I know it's kind of rude to talk about personal hygiene, but you can put it, just send them this chart. It's good to get up, take a shower, and, start your day after that. Exercise and getting fresh air, limiting media, have boundaries, and, just make sure that people are sharing tips about what are best practices, and they get a chance to talk about, this particular type of, teleworking that they're going through. Let's go to the next one. Some ideas for you to boost morale and collaboration. Obviously, we're doing well with getting people into meetings with Teams and with Zoom and other kinds of platforms, but these are typically work oriented. It's important to also think about what kind of employee engagement can be created that is not necessarily work related. We talked about this. Water coolers, virtual icebreakers, virtual town hall, the huddles, manager weekly check-in. And, don't forget there's happy hours after work, there's meet my pet, there's meet my family. I know some of these may sound cheesy, but they're not, because employees miss that. They even share recipes and all of that. So let's go to the next slide. What can you do to support your employees? I think empathy is critical. We've talked about it, but don't forget it. Stay connected. Recognize that everybody's, we're all in the same storm, but in different boats. And if your employees are showing, that they seem sad or they seem depressed, see if there is a program to help them with mental support, or if HR has anything to help them. And we're not asking you to play shrink, but do ask a few questions and see if you can help your employees. I think with that, I am going to actually tell you a little bit more about who we are, what is WorkSmart. So let's go to the next slide. Well, I think I've talked about these, and I'm going to skip this slide to go to the next one. The future of work at home does need planning now. If you think that you want to navigate into, the future with flexibility being part of, what you're offering, do start thinking about it. We are here to help you, and I'll show you how in a second. But do have a policy, do have some training, and obviously, I think very important aspects of the learning from COVID are going to be that not everybody is going to want to telework in the future, but we'll also have improved self-selection. Some people will want to continue. Some people just want to be in a hybrid situation. And I think the future is going to be about accommodating some level of flexibility, if possible, by the employer. So let's go to the next slide. So WorkSmart is an effort that is funded by King County Metro. I am the lead consultant, and what we do is that we offer free services. Everything I've talked about today, policies, agreements, doing training. I didn't get into training because I think it's a very critical part of, getting everybody under the same page. Doing focus groups to see what the pulse of the organization is, are all part and parcel of what we provide, in addition to helping some of you meet the commute trip reduction goals and plans. So what is the best way to get in touch with us? Let's go to the next slide. There's my email, there's my phone number. Obviously, email me first, please. And kingcounty.gov/worksmart will provide you with a lot of excellent tools and templates for helping you with teleworking at your organization. So don't be shy, do go to our website, and please do contact me if you would like some one-on-one personal assistance for the improvement of teleworking at your business. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was such good information. And I know information that a lot of our members will find value in, and that even our chamber with, 4 employees, can also have a lot of value in learning from. I do have some questions here that are posted in the chat that I'm going to get to. I just want to remind everyone that we do have plenty of time to ask questions. So if there is something that wasn't covered in the presentation that you were hoping would be covered, and you have a question about maybe something specific to your work situation, please don't hesitate to just go ahead and type that into either the comment section on the Facebook Live broadcast or the Q&A feature on the Zoom webinar. So I'm just going to dive right in to some of these questions. So one of them is, even though we're all mostly teleworking, how important is it to not wear our pajamas every day? I know you talked a little bit about that. Maybe we could talk about the scale of that. And what about, just wearing a nice shirt and no pants? Like, is there a psychological thing with, like, well, I look good, up here, just,
I don't, that's very funny that you asked that. I don't know if any of you caught that video prior to COVID, which was on, I can't remember which media, I think it was on CNN, and it was somebody broadcasting the news over a TV station, and he, was dressed from, obviously he had pajamas on the bottom, and he had a shirt and a tie, and his kid comes in the office because he ran away from his mom or his nanny. And in the middle of the broadcast, first of all, he comes in and the broadcaster gets up and everybody can see how he's dressed. I mean, the world treated it with laughter, and, everybody was very just saying, okay, this can happen. You don't have to get super dressed up. As it is in the state of Washington, I know a lot of you are a little bit more laid back, but, have a nice shirt on. Put something that's not compromising if you suddenly get up. But I would highly recommend getting out of your pajamas. It's just, it does lend into this whole a day that doesn't end. And it's good to, have some markers which say, okay, I'm working now. I'm going to go to sleep now. So it doesn't just blend into this endless zone that has happened. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And like you said, you never know what might happen, right? So,
Yeah,
just,
exactly.
be prepared, right? It's good.
Especially if you're dealing with external clients or with your management team, I think you should be a little careful.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's good advice. Next question. This person shares a living space with their family and 2 yapping dogs. There's no room for their own space or office, and it's hard to have much, if any, privacy and quiet.
Wow.
Yet, it's still a necessary job function for them to be on Zoom meetings pretty consistently. So any tips on that? I know I've definitely been in several Zoom meetings, where people just, even forget to put themselves on mute and, will scream at the dogs or the kids, yeah, quiet, quiet. But, obviously that's not the most professional, thing that we can do. So yeah, any tips when there's just not an option for, privacy?
My heart does go out to people who don't have enough space, with kids, with pets and all that. It's hard, but I would say that we really do have to emphasize that, you use that mute button as often as you can. And also maybe you have to go outside to take a call, just hopefully there's somebody else in the house with the rest of the family, and you may just have to go out, outside and find a place to take a call. It's really not professional to have, the dogs yapping. We need to exert some level of control over this. So otherwise you have to be on mute maybe and just communicate via the chat button. Because if it gets really disrupting for other people, I think it gives this whole work from home a bad name. And so if if you've got a quiet pet and they appear, it's cute. That's okay, I think. but kids coming in and going out, pets, yapping is not optimal. That's all I will say. Yeah,
Perfect. And I know.
you haven't lost the outdoors yet. So
Right. Yeah. Well, I think the rain is coming today,
okay.
unfortunately, but I will suggest we have an excellent dog trainer who is on the, chamber membership list that could, I'm sure, help with some of those control issues with the dogs. And then because we do have so many hospitality partners within our area too, lots of our hotel partners are making available their rooms for remote work and office space. And the chamber also has space available for members. And so I would suggest, maybe exploring, some of those other kind of offsite, options when you do have that, really important, meeting with an external client, and, you're just not able to, find that control elsewhere, that, we can help you find a space.
In fact, you're right on, Andrea, in that hotels have started this campaign about come and take, what do they call it? A workation. In fact, in Japan, they've created the name too, which is come here, and maybe you come here with your family even, and let your, kids and family roam around while you're in the room working. But hotels do provide space. Also, some of the co-working spaces may be open with very good rules. Look up co-working in your neighborhood. Just put it into your browser, and it may show up some sites that you have access to for some quiet hours.
Absolutely. So good tips on that. I appreciate that. This next question is, how important is it to look good, on web cameras and Zoom calls? Certainly as people are calling in, being able to, present themselves as professionally as possible might require some additional equipment, right? Lighting, perhaps, or, upgrades to webcams. And then, even thinking about taking the time with your personal appearance in terms of, haircuts, right? It's been difficult to get into the hair salon. So any tips on just how important is appearance, and what, if any, investments should be made, to, enhance appearance?
I think that really does become a personal choice issue. I think as long as you look neat, as long as you've brushed your hair, and you don't look like you're wearing a pajama, I think that should be the basic bottom, and from there you can build up. If I were in a public meeting, obviously I would maybe be even better groomed, but I'm comfortable, and so I don't think we need to make a big issue of it. We're not all ready to be Hollywood stars, nor is it our chosen profession. So I would say it really goes back to how you are and how you're most comfortable, but look tidy. That's all, and look awake. Don't look tired. If you are in a meeting and you are tired or you're upset about something, take your camera off. But having a webcam is important. I would not invest too much unless you are in the broadcasting field, in trying to make yourself, look better and all of that. I don't know. But again, I'm not a very young person. It may differ by age. So it's that's a tricky question.
I appreciate that, though. Like you said, I think it's a matter of personal preference, right?
Yes, of course.
And how you feel comfortable. I think that we all do our best work when we feel comfortable, and as long as, like as you said, you feel comfortable and you feel neat and healthy and awake, those are the most important things, and anything else would just be kind of personal preference.
I think if we're healthy, we look good. That's where it comes from, and it's the content of our conversations that matter. Still, not how we look.
Right, absolutely. So this question kind of ties into a little bit of that question about health, in that again, we are living through a global health crisis and a pandemic, which means we will pretty consistently have workers that are not able, to work because they are sick with COVID, right? And so there's a transition that happens as workers are not able to work due to illness, but then they are starting to come back, but they might still have some lingering symptoms of, brain fog or, just not being 100%. So even though we are teleworking and we don't have to worry about, being contagious in the workplace, kind of what is that standard for for sick time or using sick time for telework, and how should people navigate coming back from an illness? And I guess that for now it's about COVID, but pre-COVID it could have been anything, coming back from a FMLA or something like that. What would be your suggestions for coming back and having success moving back into the workplace?
I think you heard me mention the word empathy several times in the presentation. I think that we are in a world where empathy is very important because this is a global crisis and it's not regional. It's not one that you're only, your employer's going through, but that we don't have, ready solutions. So I would say empathy is key, and organizations vary on that. But this is certainly not a time. If somebody's really been sick, and they're not feeling good after, because we know COVID has residual, impacts to. Again, I'm not a physician, but we've heard about that. We've heard about it in the media quite a bit. We just have to be patient with people getting better. And I mean, let's keep in mind, it's not going to be that one day there's a magic wand and all of this will go away. It will be a progression. So we kind of have to just go with, the progression as opposed to expect perfection right now.
I think that's good advice for management in general, right? Lead
Yeah.
lead with empathy, and don't expect perfection, right? It's
No,
not, yeah, it's not possible. Absolutely.
it's not. And, really, it's not going to be one day we wake up and everything's finished. We can go out and be in the same, be the same way. It will progress that way as we fight it.
Perfect. So speaking of empathy, this person had their workplace completely shut down, and they are needing to find a new career. How would they go about doing that, knowing that lots of businesses, if they do start a new position, they're going to be starting exclusively remotely now, and again, that's so difficult to do, onboarding remotely, or maybe you can speak a little bit to that.
Sure. There is a website that I recommend that, the person who's looking for remote work to access. It's called flexjobs.com. And they do act as, kind of a bridge between employers who are looking for remote employees and employees also who are looking for it. So there is a database there, and I do encourage that people take advantage of it. There might be some other similar ones that I'm not aware of, but that's, yes, flexjobs.com. I really recommend that you look at that. Again, the other thing to think about is maybe you lost, work, maybe look for part-time work. It doesn't have to be full-time again. Some employers are looking to hire part-time. And that again, that could be another way to get you again involved in, your profession.
Perfect. I have just two more questions here, and then we can wrap up if no one else has any questions to put into the Q&A there. We talked a lot at the beginning of your presentation about trust and just how important, trust is, to any, relationship, whether that's a working relationship or not. Trust is a key element. And sometimes it's difficult to build trust when the team is completely remote. And so you had some, tips for kind of, boosting morale, even though, we're separate but still connected. Do you have any, tips or suggestions for ways that we can boost trust,
Sure.
when we're remote?
I think one of the issues that some managers had when people went home to work was that they were not, I hate to say it, but they didn't have a good understanding of what their staff was doing in the office. So for managers, it even took a little bit longer to get used to staff being remote than it was for remote employees to work. I think as managers, we need to really be on top of what our employees are doing. If it's not the quality we want, if it's not the quantity, have discussions, train them, send them to training, to tutorials. So I think it really starts with, knowing whether or not the goals are being accomplished. If they're not, ask for feedback. Why isn't it? And I think we have to also be careful that we don't judge people if an employee is being not as productive when they're working at home. Maybe start the discussion with a very open statement. How is your productivity? How are you doing? What do you think? Is there anything you're missing? Don't go in and say you're doing a really bad job. Let the employee speak up to find out what their issues are. The more of this problem solving we do, the more trust we can develop. However, employees do need to be accountable. I know that it looks kind of, for some people, it's like, just too much to fill out a weekly sheet saying what they're doing. But if that's what's going to give you as a manager trust in keeping your employee, involved and meeting their goals, ask for it. Don't, it's what you need. You need to know what they're doing and what they're accomplishing. And they need to feel accountable.
Yeah, communication and feedback.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Thank you.
And asking questions, right?
Yes.
Not making
Yes.
assumptions.
No,
Yeah.
never make an assumption.
Right.
Never.
Perfect. All right. So last question, again, kind of centered around, the same, leading with empathy, is that, what is the kind of standard etiquette when it comes to, video meetings? Is it okay, to turn off your camera, to, do something else? Is that considered, bad etiquette? Should you, put it into the chat and say, be right back, got to take a call? Kind of, what is that standard, of etiquette? And is it okay, to join a, video conference call and, never turn your camera on at all, as you said, because you're having a day, right? And, nobody needs to see you, in your bedroom with your laundry piled up, because that's the only place where you can, host your video meetings.
Right. I think that we all should be responsible enough. If we're organizing a meeting and you want all hands on deck and you want everyone to show their face, that should be said ahead of time. Because that, I attend a meeting with a client and they require everybody to show their face at this meeting. It's not, I'm not the employer, but I'll tell you, people still turn theirs off. Do you remember before COVID, how many people would sit in meetings and they wouldn't even care. They would look at their messages. I think that, first of all, if you're required to attend a meeting, but you don't want to talk and you don't want to be seen, log in so it's known that you're present, but mute your mic and stop your video. But it shows at least that you're there. Generally, if you're not speaking, mute yourself, definitely, to keep out the noise. And I really think showing your face should be dictated by who's setting the meeting and at what level they are. If it's a work meeting. Obviously, at a personal meeting, it's very different. But I don't think, for some people, it's hard for them to see themselves. In fact, that causes Zoom fatigue too. We do recommend if it's bothering you, turn your camera view off of yourself. If you want to just see the speaker, just focus on the speaker. You can do those things within, all of these video types of programs. So if showing yourself is important, it should be told, I think, upfront.
Perfect. Being clear with the expectations. Yeah,
Exactly.
early on, really important. Perfect. Any final thoughts before we close out today?
I really want to encourage you to take advantage of WorkSmart's resources, because they are free to you as employers. You have paid for them in your lifetime. These are your tax dollars at work. We can definitely come in and help you develop a program. Size is no issue. We work with small, medium, large, and please do take advantage of it. I've been doing this for over 30 years. I work in other parts of the country. I think we can be of help to you. Thank you so much for today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We really appreciate the time that you took to join us today. We do have a few other virtual events coming up. We have our Women of Influence event, which will be in the evening on October 28th. And then our Business Awards watch party also in the evening on November 4th. So we hope that you are able to join us for more of our virtual events. And again, our next SMART webinar will be on October 23rd, and we'll focus on cybersecurity for your home. Again, thank you everyone so much for being here. Thank you to Scott and South King Media for broadcasting. And if anyone has any questions or anyone needs to get a hold of Elham later, they can also contact us and we'd be happy to connect you. Stay healthy, stay safe, have a great weekend. Again, thank you so much.